Hi there, it's Linda Kaye, and we have another very, very exciting episode of Money Talk. Today, my guest is really an unbelievably special guest to me in many, many ways. But let me just first introduce a little bit about him. He wrote a book, he's an author, he's a friend, he's a co conspirator of great things about models, and my personal friend. So, we're going to dive into a few things that he's been doing from executive management to middle management to first line managers and how what we do on a daily basis, how we interact with each other can make the difference of whether your business is going to climb from 5 million to 10 million or whether you're going to get that first to the 5. There are big growth spurts that happen in here, and many people just literally will self-sabotage themselves into the failing model. That's not his model. So I want you to do two things right now. I want you to know, like, share, and send out, put a vibe in, subscribe to this channel, and send it out to all your friends because I think that people are really going to get something out of this. And I did say two. So the second thing is stay tuned. Linda gave me the courage, the confidence to move forward.
And after I was finished with Linda Kaye's training, I was at the next level.
It's Linda Kaye. But when you trust that piece of you that says, I got something to give, I have something to say, you know you've got something to do.
Get on your feet, shake your hands in the air. Welcome to the stage, Linda Kaye.
So thank you very much for staying tuned and joining us. I am going to introduce him just one more time because I think it's important for everyone to understand the value of what you're getting in this show, but the value of each and every guest. The guests are not coming in to talk about how much money they made. They're coming in as a servant to you. And as a service to you, what we do is bring out the best in how you can utilize their advice or their service or their product. But in this case, advice based on you being able to take your business up to the next level. So welcome to my show and to the stage, my good friend, author, and co-author of something that we're working on together, but you don't get to hear about it just yet, Marc Daniells. So welcome, Marc.
Good morning, Linda. How are you this morning?
I am fantastic. So, Marc, you are out on the other coast. I'm here on the West Coast. You're on the other coast, but being on the East Coast is not new to you, is it?
No, actually, I was born here. I was born in New York City, moved to Southern California when I was a mere child, grew up in Southern California, have lived from the North Coast down to the South Coast, San Diego, where you are now.
Yeah.
And then moved from there to Miami to start a business. And as everybody does, move from Miami to Minneapolis. It's a move that I understand everybody makes.
Move, right?
Yeah, that is the move. And right now I am in beautiful Franklin, Tennessee, which is just south of Nashville, which has the steamiest summers that one can possibly imagine. So I miss the SoCal summers for sure.
Well, I don't know, with all this changing weather and let me just tell you, we don't have climate change. We don't, no, we don't have that. But our summers are definitely changing, and humidity. I never felt humidity here before. In fact, I had to do something a couple of years ago I never thought I'd ever do. I put in air conditioning in my house.
Wow.
I mean, it's a funny thing, you know, things do change. But we didn't come here to talk about weather. We came here to talk about some of the things that you've been doing and some of the things that you're really, really excellent at. One of the things I think that you're so good at is being able to understand human nature, to understand what people do and why they do it, what motivates them to do that. But you've been doing that at a little bit of a corporate level, and I even wrote a book about it. So I want you to talk to us about what did you write about and how are you using it?
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, first of all. Second of all, before we get started, I'd like to give a shout out to Jimmy Buffett, who transitioned very recently. I'm wearing my margarita parrot head shirt. Oops, on that side. Parrot head shirt in honor of Jimmy today. So my book is called The Conspiracy, and it is a cautionary tale for entrepreneurs. And in my extensive work with entrepreneurial companies over the last 30 years, I've noticed a lot of trends that are really important. One is the entrepreneurial lifestyle. I know a lot of you out there who are listening to this are entrepreneurs and are really anxious to grow your business beyond the entrepreneurial stage. But that is really the most difficult bridge to cross, and there's a reason for it. The entrepreneurial stage is all about survivability. Can I really monetize my idea? Do I have an actual business and not just a hobby or a job? Can I actually make money doing this? And there are three things that define the entrepreneurial stage. One is an entrepreneur who is really involved in everything that goes on. He or she has his or her hands in everything that goes on. It's their baby, and they want to make sure it's taken care of nicely.
But
They
wait a
know every
minute. Let
process.
me stop
Sure.
you right there. Before you go on, how long do many entrepreneurs stay in the stage? Let's just say, for instance, you've got this fabulous idea for a service, not necessarily a product, and it's your expertise. It's what you do. It's what's made you, craft your skills and fine tune what you do. And people have actually paid you for it. So you go, oh, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna create a business around this model. How long do they stay in that
What a
stage?
great question. The first thing they have to decide is this a job I want for myself, or do I actually want to build a company and a business around it? If it's a job they want to create for themselves, like I have for me as a consultant and as a coach, then it can last forever. But if they want to build a business, they first have to show that they can survive within that business, then that business is sustainable over time, and then it can scale. The entrepreneurial stage usually lasts 3 to 5 years, during which we prove that it works, that we can have actual clients, that we have repeatable business, and we can make money doing it. But the most important thing is that we can build a culture that's sustainable in the long run.
Okay, now stop right there because that is possibly, I mean, what you just said was, okay, we're in this journey and we all believe that, in this journey, we're kind of working it out. It's kind of a messy thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And the reason is that things keep changing fast and they don't last for long, which is my favorite John Denver quote from Rocky Mountain High. But it is an absolute truth. One of the things, the only constant that exists in business is change. And the only thing that gets you through change is a sustainable culture.
Now, if you know, and before we jump into that, there are little leaps that we're going to take, and I want you to talk about how you bridge into those leaps. So you go from this entrepreneurial spirit, you're building, you figured out what works, what doesn't work. You found out that people will actually pay you to actually come, not to leave, and share your knowledge and your expertise. You figure out how to monetize it. You might even figure out how to productize it. Maybe you write a book about it. Maybe you write a course about it that you can now use as the handbook that, justifies, big and bigger fees, right? That's sort of in the 3 to 5 year stage. Where do you go next in that stage, and how do you get there? How do you bridge that gap?
The next stage is what we call the emerging stage, and it's about sustainability. For that to happen, not only does the entrepreneur have to get out of the way I like to describe it is the entrepreneur moves from steering the ship to charting the course, but it also begins to rely on teams to get things done as opposed to individuals to get things done. And for teams to get things done, you need written processes as opposed to oral processes that are taught, monitored, followed, and changed accordingly as conditions change. That's what makes the bridge so hard, because what works so well in the entrepreneurial stage, an entrepreneur in charge, reliance on loyal individuals to get things done, and what I like to call the oral tradition, that is things happening by word of mouth, kill you on that bridge moving over to the emerging stage, where you're moving from individual contribution to team contribution, from oral tradition to written instructions.
Why is that so hard, Mark?
It's hard for a number of reasons. First is most entrepreneurs refuse to get out of the way.
It's their baby, right? So
It,
they
it,
already.
it is their baby, and it's their baby going to kindergarten for the first time. And all of a sudden, their baby is going to be hearing from other people
And teaching them.
and teaching them things that perhaps mom and dad may not agree with. So
Okay.
the hardest thing for entrepreneurs to do is to let go of control. But what's interesting about it is they let go of managerial control, but in
Right,
fact, what
because
they
who wants to manage, the minutia process?
absolutely,
You hire people to be able to do their jobs, right?
exactly.
And then you hire their expertise, but then that piece that's missing, which I think you're talking about standard operating procedures, are you not?
Absolutely. And those are absolutely key for scalability. It's the only way
Okay.
you can scale is that
And
people
that
are
makes
doing
total
it the
sense.
same way.
That makes total sense. But let's just okay. So we've gone from stage 1 to stage 2.
hmm
We're now working those out. How long are you in that stage?
Most people stay in that stage for a long time. The reason is the next jump is to the established stage where, in fact,
Where
you're
you scale.
expanding your business into new markets or you're expanding with new services and new products. That's a fairly rare occurrence, actually.
Really?
Yeah, it
I
really
mean,
is. When you think about it, think about how many small businesses there are as
right?
opposed to how many giant businesses there are.
Well, you just have to look at the Fortune 500 or, look at the NASDAQ and you can tell, which
Right,
ones
and
make
compare that to the 5,000 Inc.
right?
Right, there's a reason there's an Inc. 5,000 and a Fortune 500.
Oh, stating the obvious, Mark.
Yes, yeah, okay. So that emerging stage can take you easily into the hundreds of millions.
Wow.
Okay,
Or if you stay stuck in the phase 2,
entrepreneurial stage, usually you're gonna max out at around 40 million. 40 million is usually the stage at which entrepreneurs have to move from that management role to a leadership role. So let's define those two, okay, real
yeah, let's
quickly.
do that.
Management is about planning and execution.
Okay.
Leadership is about people and culture. And those
That's
are
a
two very
chasm in
different
between that.
skill sets.
It's a chasm in between that.
Absolutely. In the entrepreneurial stage, the entrepreneur's taken on both of those roles. And invariably, as the company grows, one of those roles suffers.
Typically, which one?
It depends on the entrepreneur. If the entrepreneur comes from an engineering background, what tends to suffer is the leadership side of it. If the
Sure.
entrepreneur comes from a sales background, what tends to suffer is the management side of it.
So as long as you're bringing in sale, then we'll figure out how to build the
Right.
house.
It becomes sales is all that matters. Sustainability of clients no longer matters, right?
So
Yet it's really the most important.
it is the most important, but it's obviously the most neglected. And so where do you see the most impact based on your model?
I think there are two things. Number one is the recognition of the importance of culture. And
Well,
and
we hear a lot about it, Mark, but how important is that
yeah,
really?
well, one of my favorite quotes is culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk about it. What is culture? Culture is the way people behave. What's right and what's wrong, what's okay and what's not okay. How do we do things around here? How do we make decisions around here? Who do we listen to around here? How do we treat one another around here? How do we treat our customers? How do we treat our vendors? All of that is key. It's a word that's just in the last 10 years entered the vocabulary. When I wrote the conspiracy in 2014, that word really wasn't important. But what I was writing about was organizational development through organizational culture.
And it's played a big part, you know, in a lot of ways, but it really wasn't in, and maybe it was important at the IBM or, you know, the 3M, you know, level at some point, you know, because, or even, you know, within the real estate organization. You know, I look at Gary Keller's and Keller Williams' stellar growth and how they grew, but he got out of the way. And one of the most important things was, you know, when Mo Anderson took over that company as CEO, she said, we've got to have culture. You really have to understand, you know, that you're going to lead with, you know, it's God first, family second, and then your job. That was a whole mind shift around things, you know, and I think we've heard a lot more about that, but isn't that a harder thing to do? You would think that because you're smaller, you should be able to engage differently or faster or implement faster, but I think the opposite is just true, isn't it?
The key word here is a word called enrollment. And enrollment is defined as, this is what I signed up for. Okay. When you get people into an organization, they sign up for something.
Sure.
Okay. And if that changes, they begin to question it, what they signed up for.
Isn't it just, you know, okay, so if they signed up for, they got a job description and they get an exchange of money for that job description and the responsibilities and duties. Now, as things, because now, you know, as we all know, the relationship can morph. And, you know, they saw a gap in something that needed to be done that was stopping them from completing their task. They take on that extra task, but then now they want more money. And when they don't get it, this is not what I signed up for.
Money is part of it, but there are more important things. Think about it this way. Typical person starting out in their job or building a company is working anywhere between 40 and 60 hours a week.
That's it? What slackers?
80 hours a week.
Okay, there.
That tends to mean they're spending more time with their work associates and their customers than they are with their families.
That's true. That is absolutely true.
So how they are treated and how they treat others becomes absolutely key to what that work experience is like.
Go on.
Okay. If expectations were set and aren't met, that's a cultural thing. If I'm treated poorly, that's a cultural thing. If I don't feel like I belong or fit in, that's a cultural thing. If I don't feel I can speak up without fear of retribution, that's a cultural thing. If I don't feel connected to my team, if I don't think they have my back and I have theirs, that's a cultural thing. And most importantly, if I don't have a sense of purpose, that what I do matters, what my team does matters, what my company does matters, that there's real purpose involved, that's a cultural thing. And all of those tend to affect me and my daily living within this 40 to 70, 80 hours a week.
So is
people
that where,
join for culture and leave for culture.
So talk about burnout for a second.
Okay. So I want you to imagine you're doing something you love to do, and you're surrounded by people who love to do it, and you feel a sense of camaraderie. You know when something slips, someone else will pick it up.
Right.
You know if you make a mistake, instead of being criticized, you'll be coached. Okay. And how you feel at the end of the week with that, or how you feel at the end of a project with that, as opposed to the exact opposite.
So let's talk about that exact opposite. Let's just say you were on a team that needed to meet a deadline for, software or an application, or, you know, a book writing team, or, you know, whatever that is, would fill in the blank. Maybe it was, you know, the marketing message and getting your funnels correct, whatever that was, you were dependent and you missed that deadline. Now there's a ripple effect, isn't there? So there's from the expectation of where were we going to go with this? What happens if we don't meet the deadline? But something else in there happens too. And it's so human nature. Can you talk about it?
Sure. What happens is...
And wait a minute, ladies and gentlemen, he also reads minds because he has no idea what I just asked him, but he's going to answer.
I actually do.
You answer it 100%.
I actually do. What happens is the blame game.
There it is. You
Okay.
do read minds.
Um, well, sometimes. The only one I have problems with is my own, but we'll put that to the side for a moment. The blame game happens. Okay. It's
Right.
not me, it's them. It's not me, it's them.
If it weren't for them.
Salespeople saying, if it weren't for the damn customers,
Mhm.
imagine how good this would work, right?
Right?
And what happens is you end up in an environment in which managers behave like parents as opposed to coaches.
Okay. And so what would that look like? Well, how does it
Okay,
show up?
what it looks like is using what I call the 6 poison words.
Oh no, there's poison.
Yeah. And they're
Introduce the
parental
poison,
words. They're
please.
parental
Okay.
words.
All right.
Okay. Good, bad, right, wrong, should, shouldn't.
Okay. So
That's
I
good. That's bad. That's right. That's wrong. You should do that. You shouldn't do that.
you
That's
shouldn't
how
do that. You
parents
shouldn't
talk
have.
to children. The way
And
coaches talk.
then children learn how to do that with each other. They learn how to do that amongst their team members. They learn how to do that with just the family dog.
Exactly. In the workplace, what we do is replace all of those words with 2 words, working and not working. That's working because. That doesn't work because. And all of a sudden, that leads to a conversation as opposed to a put down.
Right, because now
Nobody,
you're going to get cooperation when you say that's not working, or that really worked well because, right? It
exactly.
almost feels like a praise, and then it didn't work. Doesn't sound like an accusation, like you got to defend yourself
It's not.
or
It's a how do
you're
we
right.
improve it?
There you
And
go.
the emphasis isn't on the mistake, the emphasis is on the improvement.
But we don't necessarily naturally go there. So how do you
No.
teach that? How do you coach that
Okay,
into
that's a
not
great
just an
question.
individual,
It's
but
a great
into a corporation?
it's a great question. Everybody has an initial influence. Okay. Let me ask you a question, Linda. What was your biggest influence in business? Take a moment, and what was your biggest influential moment in business that really has stayed with you all the way through?
Well, I can tell you that the one key thing for me was once I learned how to sell, I didn't care what I had to sell anymore. The fact that I had the power within me to control my future, that was powerful. It was everything.
Super, super. I love that. Okay. And what that is the thought.
Mhm.
Okay. So, my biggest influence, and it's influenced everything I've done in business, comes from a movie from the 70s. Now, I know a lot of our audience wasn't born then, so I'll tell you a little bit about the movie. The
Okay.
movie was called The Paper Chase, and it starred Timothy
Timothy
Bottoms
Bottoms.
and
Yeah.
and and
Oh
John
God, I'm
Houseman.
dating myself.
Okay. And it's about a first-year Harvard law student. And he's taking a class taught by Professor Kingsfield, played by John Houseman,
Oh, that's right.
which is Contracts 1A. And there's a line in there that Houseman delivers, and the line is, "You come in here with your minds filled with mush, and if you're lucky, you leave here thinking like lawyers." And that affected everything I have done. How do successful business people think about things? How do successful salespeople think about things? And the answer is, how you think about it determines how you perceive it. How
Mhm.
you perceive it determines what you do about it. What you do about it determines in a long run about the outcome. Therefore, how you think about it determines the outcome. What you changed from was they're in charge to I'm in charge. All that
100.
was a simple thought that changed your life.
And it was a simple shift
It
because
is.
I had been, superstar on stage, but once I understood how to take that it shifted my entire perspective because if I could sell something as boring as a magnetic tape drive to an IT professional, I had no idea about follow a script. If I could sell this, I could sell anything. For me, that was the most powerful thing that I could have ever imagined
There you
because now
go.
I can control my future.
So once we make the thinking shift from I'm in charge and you're below
Mm.
to no job or role is more important in taking care of the customer, and the way in which a manager treats an employee is the way that employee is going to treat a customer. Once we begin thinking that way, then the world changes.
Oh,
In
but that
fact, there
sounds
was
doesn't.
actually a book written called The Customer Comes Second, Your Employees Come First.
Interesting.
And it was based on this theory that the way you treat them is the way they will treat your customers.
So,
Go ahead.
and that brings up to mind, I think of possibly the worst people in customer service jobs that don't belong there are always positioned in that in that job description. How do you find the right people to be in the right job positions and then coach out the behavior that you don't want and replace it with what you do want?
That's a great question. Number one is to begin to understand that coaching is an ongoing process that occurs daily, not just in a one-on-one or, God forbid, in a yearly review.
Oh
Okay.
boy. Yeah, no kidding.
Think about a professional athlete, or think about anybody who has a coach. That coaching goes on all the time. Okay, that's number one. Number two is to understand what coaching is. Coaching is suggestions, alternatives, and insights that change performance. That's what coaching is. Okay, so
It isn't telling them what to do.
no, that's the last thing you want to do. So imagine that you are a middle distance sprinter. You're getting ready for the Olympics in Paris next year, and you've just hired a new coach. And you go out and the coach says, show me a 440. You run your 440. And at the end of the coach says, good job. At which point, you know for sure you have the worst coach in the world, because good job does nothing. It's not an insight. It's not a suggestion. It's a compliment, which is nice, but it's not coaching. Now, suppose you go out and you get a new coach and the same thing happens. You run a 440 and the coach goes this way. I enjoyed watching you run. And I think you hit your marks here, here, and here. But your reaction time needs to be a little faster. We're going to work on that. And I want you to make sure that you start your sprint 10 yards earlier, because you will have it in you to complete the race. All of a sudden, you've gotten advice and you have things to work on that will improve performance.
Well, not only that, but you've identified probably where that runner actually knows where their weaknesses are, but doesn't know what's causing it or how to make that improvement.
Exactly.
Because he didn't do it himself.
It's that second set of ears and eyes that see things differently. Coaches, the best coaches are cameras and microphones. They see things, they hear things, and then based on their experience and their ability to work with the people they're working with, to provide those insights, suggestions, and alternatives to way things are being done, and provided in such a way that the absolute solution actually comes out of their mouth, not out of the coach's mouth.
Right, as if it were their suggestion.
Exactly.
So women have been doing this for their relationships for centuries. So we're pretty
there
good.
You go. There you go. In my practice, I work with primarily CEOs who are beginning to make that transition from steering the ship to charting the course. And I work with first level managers who are just learning how to manage. Interesting statistic. Most first line managers get their first management job in their middle 20s and their first management training in their mid 40s. That's a long time to be winging it without any help at all.
Well, not only that, but you've now learned how things should work in your mind without any training. But it's like letting a broken bone heal without having the proper setting and structure to make it heal right. You're now limping along, and on top of that, you've now acquired other responsibilities, from your personal life or professional life, in a way that you may or may not feel ready for it, but you're facing it and you're taking the same tools and fixing the problem exactly the same way.
And not getting the results you want, which goes back to that burnout question that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which leads to the blame. It's not me, it's them.
It's them. If
Okay.
only they.
Yeah.
And right?
Yeah.
So
And the way out of blame is to understand what you've understood from the beginning of your career. And that is, it's me. It's always me. One of the things I always tell new leaders is when something goes wrong, ask yourself, how did I contribute to this?
not who can I blame?
No, how did I contribute to this? And what changes do I have to make so that it doesn't happen again? Because invariably, I've done something, not giving proper instructions, not following up properly. You asked a question about hiring. Let me go back to that for a second, because this is
Sure.
part of what managers do. When I coach managers on hiring, I coach them on three things. The first is binary. Do they have the skill set to do it? Or can they be coached or taught how to do it? That's the easy part. What hiring managers should look at are two things. Number one is, are they a cultural fit to the organization? And number two is, can I manage them? That is, do they fit into my management style? Because the odds are my management style isn't going to change and they're not going to change. So longevity on the job is all three of them. They know how to do it, or they can be coached how to do it, but that's binary. But the other two really are objective. And there are a series of questions you can ask in the hiring process to find out. Tell me about the best boss you ever had. What made them the best boss? Tell me about the worst boss you ever had. What made them the worst boss? Tell me about what you loved about your last job. If you had a magic wand and could have changed anything about your last job, what would you have changed? And you begin to get a lot of insight into what it is works for them and what it is doesn't work for them. Unfortunately, for most companies, what culture is are the things they write up on the wall. And the one that I find the funniest is that we're trustworthy. If you have to write on the wall that you're trustworthy, you've got a much larger problem than you have to write it on the wall.
Well, I don't know. I think we're used to that. In God we trust. We see it on our money. Should we not?
Exactly. So what you want to look for are not only the values your company has, but what are the behavioral aspects? So for example, if the value is we treat one another with respect, what does that mean?
Yeah, you'd have to really put some parameters around there.
Exactly. Unless you have the behavioral aspects associated with that. Okay.
It's like it looks like this, not like that. So you give them a difference. Okay.
What I call the observational behaviors. This is what it looks like. Okay. We treat our customers with respect. What does that look like?
Right.
Okay.
Or what does that sound like?
Exactly. We're transparent in our transactions. What does that look like?
Yeah, what does that mean? There's so much jargon
who knows?
available.
The problem is that so much in business, we use what I call conceptual words. Transparency is a great conceptual word.
Mm-hmm.
It means whatever you need it to mean to whoever, right?
Correct.
Instead of that, okay? So all of this comes under the realm of culture, how we behave, how we treat one another, what's okay, what's not okay. What happens when you don't follow the rules? All of those things, I think, fit into why culture is so important for sustainability and growth. So there are three things that have to happen for sustainability and growth. One is culture. The other is structure, right? So you need to make sure that your organization is structured properly and that you have the systems in place and you have the organization in place that works, that can deal with the change that occurs, and that you have actual teamwork going on as opposed to team act going on. By teamwork, I mean that teams trust one another as opposed to each one is focusing on their own individual tasks. At the lower end of teamwork, you have everybody wearing the same color shirt. At the highest end of teamwork, you have people working together as a team to serve the customer, in which no job is more or less important when it comes to serving the customer. So the team takes care of the customer and the leader takes care of the team. Leader's job is people and culture. Manager's job is planning and execution. Team's job is getting it done. Customer's job is feeling better after transaction than before the transaction occurred.
And it brings up another really important topic too, that as the kids have learned the blame game or the accountability from those 6 nasty words that parents have ingrained into us, right? So we bring it forward. I see that you're doing a few things, Marc, that are helping young people at a very, very still impressionable but really early stage before they start going to work. And you're volunteering with something called the Junior Achievement of Middle Tennessee. Can you tell me why that's important and what you're doing?
that is one of the most fun and most rewarding things I've ever done. I work with kids from the inner city who are interested in becoming entrepreneurs. And it's interesting because all they know about entrepreneurship is buying and selling sneakers.
Or making big bucks. They think,
Yeah,
they go to social
okay.
media, and that's their point of reference.
And their point of reference has always been their idols, either in music or in sports or in that area. And they really don't understand the nature of business. They understand the nature of making deals. They're really good at that.
Are
But they
they?
don't understand the nature of how business works. And working with these kids and helping them to grow personally and to bring something to their lives that's really never been there before. And that is true discipline, as opposed to being disciplined.
What's the difference?
The difference is one comes from inside, the other comes from outside.
Go on.
Okay. True discipline from the inside is I'm doing this because I signed up for it and I see the value in getting it done. Okay. There's no burnout at that level. It doesn't exist. Okay. The other is constantly being told you're wrong. You
Oof.
can't. It isn't. Don't. Okay.
Yeah, that's got to be a demotivator.
The big joke is that we believe that being disciplined leads to discipline. Let me give you the example. I bet this has happened to everybody.
Right.
You're going through the market and you're putting things in your cart and you see overworked mom with 2 kids, right? Both in the cart. One kid hits the other kid. The other kid starts crying. So mom hits the first kid and says, "Don't hit your brother."
God.
We've all seen it.
Right. And then the first one was like now ticked off, and he's going to turn around and smack the second one, right?
There you go. There you go. It's crazy.
It's
absolutely crazy. So instead of these kids learning by being coached, they're being held down by being parented in school.
That's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate because teachers aren't taught how to coach. They're taught how to parent. And the parenting is right, wrong, good, bad, should, shouldn't. By the way, I'll ask you to define a word for me. Define the word should.
Define an expectation based on somebody else's opinion.
Exactly. Exactly.
or my expectation, it should go this way.
Exactly.
Right?
So it's another one of those wonderful conceptual words that doesn't mean anything. So
well,
instead
it's also
of
a setup also be so you can insert somebody to blame.
Yeah. And it becomes blame.
It could have gotten me there, but if you had given me better instructions, I'd have gotten there.
Yeah. And you can see people going home, teachers, for example, if it weren't for the administration, if it weren't for the kids, if it weren't for their parents, if it weren't for all of those things, instead of them looking and saying, what's the best I can do in the situation that I have? And how can I make this work for the most people? So the more we begin to look inward, as you suggested, and understand that the power lies within it, never lies without. When we're coaching, the idea isn't for us to instruct, but for us to lead. We lead them to the answer where they discover the answer and it comes out of their mouth.
And so then now what is the net result when this is all working together? And I'm giving people, our viewers, sort of a sneak peek on this book because I consumed it in like a couple of hours, and it was like I just couldn't devour it fast enough because it spoke to me on a level that I was living, I was living through the examples that you were giving, and of course, all the historical things that occurred at that time, because we were in similar tracks back in the day, working for high tech companies. But the thing that really kind of struck me was, the solution, the model. Can we tease it out at you just a little bit?
Sure. A little bit of background. The conspiracy is about a company that had been doing very well at the beginning and was starting to fail because it couldn't keep up with its own success. And the story is about how the CEO of the company finally let go and let other people take charge, and how it developed its organizational development to handle what needed to be handled by its cultural development. And they decided that there were really three things that they needed to have: principles on which they worked, the tools they would use to get things done, and how they would do things. So they came up with something called the model, which consists of 9 boxes, which lays out the structure, growth and progress, and teamwork for principles, tools, and practices. So I'll give you an example. For practices, the structure of practices is in planning. There's a great line that planning is difficult, the will to plan is even harder. And what happens with lots of companies is they go forward and they do things without planning them first, and then they're surprised when things don't work out. Another great quote is, it isn't that they didn't know the solution, it's that they never understood the problem.
And isn't that very typical, not knowing the problem and
Not spending time understanding what the problem is, so that the solution you come up with is correct. So
this is an important point, and it isn't just for corporations. This is so important because it's one of the topics that I actually speak about, which is, how do you know what to sell when you don't know what the problem is?
This is great. So let me take you through a 3-step process that I teach all the time that anybody can use.
Okay.
That will buy back 1/3 of your week. Just by doing this, 1/3 of your week. You ready?
I am.
Before you undertake anything, you ask yourself 3 questions. Why am I doing this? What outcome do I want? And what's the best way to achieve that outcome? I'll go over that again.
Why
am I doing this? What outcome do I want? And what's the best way to achieve that outcome? If you cannot answer all 3 of those questions, you do not undertake the task until you can. It's really simple. And think about how many times during your week you ask yourself, why did I do that?
Oh my God.
Okay. Then you go back and take all of those, why did I do that? And that's 1/3 of your week.
Dang. All right.
So why did I do it? Why am I doing this? What outcome am I looking for? And what's the best way to achieve that outcome? Okay. So why am I doing this is the mindset. That's the thinking about it, right? What outcome do I want? That's the planning. Understanding the problem to be solved. Third, how do I solve the problem? What's the best way to do it? That's the execution.
Too often I think we start at the execution, work our way backwards.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We start with, this is what I want, this is how I'm going to do it. Okay. Or this is what I'm going to do in order for this to happen. Okay. And so let's go back to money talks. Okay. Money matters. Money is the way we measure a lot of things, but money isn't a cause. Money is a result. Money is an outcome. Money is an outcome of behavior. A behavior is an outcome of planning. Planning is an outcome of thinking.
And there should be a lot more of that going on, don't you
You've
think?
got to work it backwards. You can't work it forwards.
Oh, listen,
So,
we're all real good at working things backwards.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So the
We
key
just have the
becomes
order a little fun.
not if I only do this and I only do this and I'm only do that. Why are you doing those things?
There you
Are
go.
those the best things to be doing? Are those the things I need to do now? So let's go to that third one. What's the best way to achieve that? How do you know when you're done with something?
Yeah. How do
Okay,
you know?
so you're working in a commercial deal,
Mhm.
and everything's been put together, and it's at its last stages. So you ask yourself two questions before you make that phone call and begin bothering people again. You ask
Right.
yourself these two questions. Question number one is, have I done everything that's appropriate?
Mm.
Question number two is, am I doing anything that's inappropriate?
Well, and you bring that up because that is exactly an issue that I was dealing with this morning. And the process for me was, did I deliver what I said I was going to deliver when I said I was going to deliver it? And there was a disconnect between the expectation. I thought you were going to do it sooner or faster or immediately, and the unintended consequence is my having to go back and repitch it and resell it again when I shouldn't have had to do that if I had managed those expectations.
So let's talk about managing expectations,
Okay.
which is another difficult thing.
It is.
Okay, so number one is I say to you, I'm going to have this done by this time. I want to make sure that I've defined this. I'm going to have these 3 contracts notarized. Okay, there's a specific deliverable.
Sure.
And in your hands, a specific deliverable no later than 3 p.m. September 14th.
And then when that can't happen.
Okay, when that can't happen, hope is not a strategy.
Oh, no, it's not.
Communication is a strategy. And the moment you know it can't happen, you communicate. Okay,
There you
but there's
go.
more to it. Once you've given that instruction, then the other person parrots it back. Let me make sure I understand.
Yes, there you go.
You will deliver to me 3 notarized contracts in my hand no later than September, what do we say, 14th at 3 p.m., 15th at 3 p.m. Did I get that right?
Ooh.
Did I leave anything out?
Oh.
2 questions always when you're repeating back what you've heard. Did I get that right? Did I leave anything out?
And do you leave room for, if that can't happen, I will, and then you take
So the next thing is,
all things are not created equal, nor always in your control.
Okay, next, will that work for you?
Okay.
Here's how I'm going to follow up.
Oh, there's that F word.
Yeah, here's how I'm going to follow up. Okay, if anything should get in the way, here's how I'll notify you.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
That's setting expectations that are behavioral as opposed to conceptual.
100%.
Like, okay, what do conceptual sound like? I'll take care of it.
I'll take care of it. Right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, speaking of taking care of, we are out of time, and I know we could go on for hours because the topic is so important, and the guest is even more delightful in talking about the subject because he has a true passion for it. So, Marc, I want to thank you for joining us today. But I think this is not just a concept. I think you actually have something for our listeners.
I do. For the first 5 of you who are interested in getting a free autographed copy of my book, I'd appreciate it if you'd write me at Marc Daniells, and it's spelled exactly the way you see it up on the screen, at consultant.com. First 5 emails I get in, I will sign a book just for you and get it out to you immediately.
So listeners, if you're listening, I'm going to repeat that so that we're all managing our own expectations. Put your name in, put your phone number, put your email, put an address where he can send it, because something that gets returned in the mail, you'll wonder what happened to it. So make sure you give him enough information so you can reach out to him. And that is his email, Marc with a C, not with a K, Marc Daniells @consultant.com. Marc, thank you so very much for joining us today. This has been so delightful, such a great help, and such a monumental task of undoing the damage that we've received as children in the best of intentions from our parents.
Always.
And then being able to repeat it over and over and over again until our lives are not functioning, our companies are not functioning, and moreover, we're not getting the success that we know is ours. So
it's been my pleasure, Linda. Thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us today. I invite you back next week at 11 o'clock a.m. on Pacific Standard Time, when I have an unbelievably really special guest, and wait till you hear about him. So again, thank you for joining us. See y'all next week. Do you like to talk about money? If you do, and you'd like to be a guest, contact me at lindakay360.com.